It is Friday, October 16th, 2020. I'm in the process of narrating my Pedigree of the Phoenix website, which is basically an essay about how total solar eclipses, more specifically a bird-like pattern perceivable in the sun's corona during some total solar eclipses, inspired the myth of the phoenix and basically a whole flock of other mythical birds and bird gods, most notably the ancient Egyptian solar falcon god Horus, and of course the winged sun symbols of Egypt and Mesopotamia and other cultures. So I'm in the middle of it. I'm just going to keep going. I will add that this is very impromptu. I have not even read this in quite some time. I have not rehearsed this. I'm just reading it straight up as we go along, and I'll occasionally interject something. But basically, I haven't actually read this. I'm actually reminding myself of things I'd forgotten that I wrote. So here we go. A Mixtec ceremonial shield known as a chimali that was collected from a cave near Acatlan, Puebla, Mexico prior to 1900 by C.A. Purpose and is now in the collection of the Museum of the American Indian, is considered to be one of the finest examples of Mixtec mosaic art. Thousands of minuscule pieces of meticulously cut and polished turquoise and other brightly colored stones fashion the patterns and symbols on the 12-inch surface of this wooden shield. A significant motif depicted on this chimali is what I consider to be one of the finest examples of the winged sun disk symbol yet to be found in Central America. A rayed or petaled sun disk, which is in turn surrounded by 8 outer points or rays that in all probability represents the 8-fold division of the solar year into 2 solstices, 2 equinox, and the 4 midpoints between them, is flanked on either side by rectangular feathered bands. These bands have been interpreted by archaeologists to represent the celestial band, whatever that is. But the fact that they are clearly feathered like wings leaves me with virtually no doubt that this symbol is nothing less than a Mixtec version of the ubiquitous winged sun disk symbol. A female figure, considered to be a deity and holding an object in each fist, appears to be plunging head downward directly below the sun disk. 2 other human figures standing on either side of the plunging goddess hold objects similar to those carried by the goddess. An irregular shape that may be a speech scroll, similar to the speech bubbles that are familiar in modern cartoons, extends from the open mouths of these figures. These 2 figures appear to be priests making an offering to the deity, and this scene is extremely reminiscent of the Assyrian bas-reliefs, which depict priests or winged genii making offerings directly below the ring with wings symbol. At the bottom of this scene, extending downwards from between the feet of the 2 figures, is the Mixtec glyph for the town of Colhuacan, which is an important Mixtec center in the Valley of Mexico in medieval times. On either side of this glyph is a vertical string of 4 dots, which are believed by archaeologists to have calendrical significance and have been interpreted to mean either the year 1461 or 1513 by one archaeologist. I thought it might be worthwhile determining whether a total solar eclipse occurred over Colhuacan in either of these 2 years. Theodor von Oppolzer's Canon of Eclipses shows total solar eclipses occurring over the Yucatan Peninsula on June 17th, 1452, February 13th, 1477, August 8th, 1496, but not in 1461 or 1513. It is still my opinion significant. It is still in my opinion significant that 3 total solar eclipses occurred over the region of Colhuacan in the space of less than 50 years, as this would indicate that the Mixtec Indians that created the ceremonial shield had ample opportunity to witness the bird-like pattern of the sun's corona during that time. It is far from insignificant, in my view, that the central portion of this particular rayed sun disk symbol contains what appears to be a mixtic version of the Mesoamerican Al-Nuahi sign. Two parallel lines traverse the upper third of the inner circle of the sun disk and beneath them. Slightly lower than the central point of the sun disk is a dot. The Olan Nahui sign, which I may not be pronouncing right, by the way, forms the center of the disc-shaped Mayan and Aztec calendars, and it is clearly understood to represent an eye by many archaeologists, as I have made clear in my article about the total eclipse of the sun and the concept of the eye in the sky. The appearance of the Olan Nahui sign within the winged sun disk on this ancient mixtic ceremonial shield should tend to underline the calendrical significance of this Shimali, while at the same time suggesting that this mixtic winged sun was in fact inspired by the total solar eclipse, or was its Egyptian and Mesopotamian counterparts. I have already pointed out that the total solar eclipse's remarkable similarity in appearance to an eye, and how some of the Egyptian and Mesopotamian versions of the winged sun disk symbol incorporated this important symbolic aspect of the eclipse into the symbol by depicting the sun disk like an eye. I have very good reason to believe that two lines crossing the upper third of this mixtec sun disk represent the upper eyelid, and that the small dot centered directly below them is intended to represent the pupil of an eye. Thus, this mixtec winged sun symbol, which would be the direct counterpart of the Egyptian and Mesopotamian versions of the winged sun disk symbol, which are represented as winged eyes. Stone slab number 2 from Zaachila, a Mayan bas-relief, which was carved circa the 9th century and is now displayed in the Museo Nacional de Antropología in Mexico City, depicts what would appear to be a winged eye hovering over two seated figures in a manner that resembles Mesopotamian stone reliefs of the winged sun disk symbol. The very real possibility that the region of the ancient Mixtecs, Mayans, Aztecs, and the very real possibility that the religion of the ancient Mixtecs, Mayans, Aztecs, and other Mesoamerican cultures, little Freudian slip there, Mesoamerican, Mesopotamian, there are similarities, included a supreme sky god, which was inspired by the winged solar eye that is readily perceivable in the total solar eclipse. It is clearly suggested by the name of the Mesoamerican deity Kinikakmu, which translates from the Yucatec tongue into English language as Sun Eye Fire Maka. So Sun Eye and Fury Bird. Looks like we have an image missing, and we don't even have a text description of it. And then on the right here we have falling star associated with sun and moon glyph. So here we have falling star, and then a sun and moon glyph, and we're comparing it. So let's see what we have to say here, because like I said, this is not rehearsed. I haven't read this in quite some time. In the Face of the Earth by Cecilia F. Klein, her figure 75 depicts what is described as a ceramic figure with owl and weapons shield, Teotihuacan classic period. The owl in question is more probably an eagle. It certainly looks more like an eagle than an owl to me, particularly when one considers that Aztec eagle warriors guarded the temples of Teotihuacan. This owl, or eagle, is depicted in a manner which is virtually identical to the imperial eagles of Europe, as well as the bald eagle which appears on the Great Seal of the United States of America. The head looks straightforward, the wings stretch out on either side of a rayed sun disk with a hand depicted within it, and the legs splay out on either side of the body formed by the sun disk with the tail fanned out between them. Two weapons, which are very similar to the objects carried by the figures on the Mixtec shield, crisscross behind the sun disk. Once again, the sun disk forms the body of the bird, and if the head and legs were removed, we would see a symbol which distinctly resembles the Mesopotamian version of the winged sun disk. So we have it here. So that's the eagle around a rayed sun disk. These rayed sun disks are essentially inspired by observations of the total eclipse sun with the sun's corona around it. So this is solar eclipse symbolism, very obvious to me. So what is the missing image? Okay, it's the Great Seal. Yeah, so here I had the eagle from the Great Seal of the United States to make the comparison. It actually is very similar, but unfortunately I don't have that image. It is not in the least bit insignificant, in my view, that Joseph Campbell, the famous expert on ancient mythology, has identified the bald eagle depicted on the Great Seal as a variant of the solar eagle of Zeus, in which I would propose is likely to have been inspired by the winged sun disk of the Egyptians. After all, the original designers of the Great Seal of the United States of America, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams, were well-educated men and thus almost certainly quite familiar with the esoteric symbolism of ancient Egyptian religion. A pamphlet on the Great Seal of the United States of America that was produced by the United States government informs us that the species of bird which originally appeared on the earliest prototypes of the Great Seal, i.e. those designed by the original committee formed by the three revolutionary heroes named previously, was none other than the ubiquitous phoenix. The ancient mythical sunbird, which may be readily shown to trace its pedigree back to the ancient Egyptian Bennu bird and the ethereal cosmic bird that is often perceived during the total eclipse of the sun. Often, actually, I wouldn't go that far these days. It's actually comparatively rare for the bird-like pattern. I guess I was a little, oh dear, we still got time. I thought I was running out of time here. Still got 8 minutes. So yeah, often's a bit of a stretch, but certainly this sunbird symbolism is seen in a reasonable number of solar eclipses, although it is a minority of them. A colorful mural from one of the temples of Teotihuacan depicts an anthropomorphic bird-like being which has a human face and displays human hands at the extremities of its widely outstretched wings. The plume-like tail feathers of this anthropomorphic being point upwards, and they constitute the ceremonial headdress of the human face. Just as the bird-like tail feathers depicted on some pharaoh hair symbols, the Assyrian and Persian version of the winged sun disk constitute the kilt-like dress of the human form of the deity. So my pacing on that wasn't very good, but maybe I'll try it again. The plume-like tail feathers of this anthropomorphic being point upwards, and they constitute the ceremonial headdress of the human face. Just as the bird-like tail feathers depicted on some pharaoh hair symbols, the Assyrian and Persian version of the winged sun disk, constitute the kilt-like dress of the human form of the deity. With this easily verifiable fact in mind, I have considerable reason to propose that the plume-like polar rays of the sun's corona directly inspired the feathered headdresses and the plumed crowns of Aztec and Mayan priests and rulers. This particular figure compares very favorably to some examples of the Mesopotamian winged sun disk symbol, which depicts the upper solar rays of the sun's corona, and it's quite uncanny how closely the polar plumes depicted on these Mesopotamian winged sun disk symbols resemble the beautiful plumed headdresses that are portrayed gracing the heads of Mayan and Aztec dignitaries on numerous stelae, bas-reliefs, and wall murals throughout Mesoamerica. In the Art of the Hittites by Ekrem Akugal, we find examples of human figures, in all probability priests, who are apparently wearing winged sun disk symbols on the top of their heads. I do not know whether the winged sun disk symbols on these figures are intended to represent actual headdresses that were worn for ceremonial purposes by Hittite priests, but it's a very real possibility that must be given serious consideration. Regardless of whether or not these winged sun disks attached to the heads of Hittite people represent actual headgear, they bear a striking resemblance to the plumed headdresses of the ancient Mayans and Aztecs, as well as several other New World cultures. A terracotta anthropomorphic figure from Guerrilla, Colombia, wears an elaborate headdress which includes what is almost certainly a sun disk flanked on either side by stubby wings, and numerous representations of New World gods and dignitaries are portrayed wearing plumed headdresses that incorporate similar religious iconography. So we got some missing images here. This typical Mayan plumed headdress with wings spreading on either side of it, most probably inspired by the sunbird that is seen during some total solar eclipses. And this Colombian headdress with a large rayed sun at its center is almost certainly inspired by total solar eclipses. Unfortunately, the Wayback Machine did not preserve those images. The distinct similarity of the Aztec sunbird portrayed in the mural from Teotihuacan to some of the totem carvings of the Indians of the Pacific Northwest, such as the Haida, Nootka, Kwakiutl, and the Tlingit tribes, is immediately apparent. The sacred art of the Pacific Northwest Indians is replete with winged anthropomorphic beings such as Black Thunderbird and Raven, whose fabulous stories revolve around their relationship to the sun. These mythical creatures may be readily understood to be inspired by the gigantic cosmic bird that is revealed to humanity during total solar eclipses. There can be no doubt that the Haida, Kwakiutl, and Tlingit Indians were perfectly familiar with the symbolism of solar eclipses, since their mythology is replete with various stories which explain solar eclipses as the sun and the moon making love, and the sun being eaten by the mouth of heaven, etc. Proceeding southwards to Peru, we find numerous examples of birds whose round bodies appear to be sun discs. The cover illustration of Traducción, Escritura y Violencia Colonizadora, un estudio de la obra del Inca Garcilaso by Susana Jacfalvi Leyva, depicts a fine example of such a bird which very closely resembles the winged solar disk of Egypt and Mesopotamia, although I have not been able to discover the original ancient Peruvian artwork which inspired this modern drawing. The double-headed eagle clasping serpents in its talons, which is an almost universal motif that can be considered to be inspired by the imagery of the total solar eclipse, and a variation of the winged disk symbol, appears on the fabrics of the Paracas Indians. An abstract figure that would appear to be pre-Columbian winged eye symbol is found on another example of ancient Peruvian fabric. A white, jagged, reverse S-shaped wing extends from a circular hub that contains a white inner circle with a central dot. Two smaller and darker wings extend between the large jagged ones, giving this abstract figure a shape that is quite reminiscent of the swastika, which is definitely a solar symbol. How are we doing for time? A couple of minutes left. Okay, unfortunately, again, the image is not available on the archive website. Okay, I think this is it. Birds whose heads are depicted as huge eyes that may also be understood to be sun discs, particularly when one considers the fact that the total eclipse sun does in fact resemble the pupil and iris of an eye, appear repeatedly in the art of the Nazca Indians. The Nazca Indians are probably most famous for the mysterious lines and gigantic ground drawings, i.e. geoglyphs, of birds and other animals that they traced out on the arid altiplano of southern Peru. These animal and bird figures are best viewed from high in the air, and it is thus perfectly reasonable to deduce that these ancient drawings were meant to be seen by the eyes of the sky-dwelling gods of the Nazca Indians. While most of the figures of birds represent identifiable species of birds, including the hummingbird and the frigate bird, there is one figure which would appear not to have any head, and furthermore seems to once have had a face drawn onto its body. I have very good reason to believe that this ancient Nazca ground drawing may well have been a Nazca version of the winged sun disk symbol. The face that is readily perceivable in the body of this bird-like figure, according to my hypothesis, would thus be an anthropomorphic representation of the face of the sun god, contained within the bird-like form of the corona seen during a total solar eclipse. It is well known that most of the native cultures of pre-Columbian America represented their sun god in various anthropomorphic or animal forms, and there are numerous examples of the rayed sun disk symbol depicted with a human or animal face on it, such as the one presented in Pym and Siemens dottings on the roadside in Panama, Nicaragua, and Mosquito. And we're done for now. We will continue this soon.